The silver tide, a western nightmare one. The peculiar rupture, a rancher's grim discovery. Dust swirled softly outside the sturdy windows of Clint Harding's remote ranch house, deep in the unforgiving scrublands of Wyoming. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of antiseptic and something metallic. Clint, a man of 43, sat alone, his gaze fixed on his left leg. For 3 agonizing months, a peculiar lump, just above his knee, had grown steadily. He dismissed it as a ranching mishap, a kick from a steer, a scrape from mending fences. The nearest town, Harmony Creek, was a 2-day ride through relentless terrain, and Clint had learned long ago that out here, you just toughed it out. But this wasn't just any pain. Each morning, the throbbing intensified, and the mysterious growth pulsed beneath his weathered skin. What started as a marble-sized knot had swollen into a malevolent, purplish mass that made every step a grueling battle. Clint endured in silence, telling himself it'd heal, like every other injury from his hard life. His isolation meant no one witnessed his struggle. His closest neighbor, Jed Miller, lived 15 miles east, and their friendship mostly involved trading supplies and news from the outside world. Weeks dragged on, and the growth began to change in ways that deeply unnerved him. The skin stretched thin, taking on a sickly yellowish hue, reminiscent of infected wounds from his military days. Sometimes, late at night, when the pain kept him awake, Clint felt a building pressure inside the mass, as if something was trying to claw its way out. The morning everything changed, began like any other. Clint limped out to check his cattle, favoring his good leg, the mysterious lump throbbing with every stride. The cattle clustered near the watering hole, their breath puffing white in the crisp morning air. He just finished checking the fence line when a sharp, tearing sensation ripped through his leg. Looking down, he watched in stunned silence as the taut skin finally ruptured. The fluid that gushed out was unlike anything he'd ever seen, thick and yellowish, mixed with what looked like tiny fragments of metal. As it dripped onto the dry earth, Clint could see the pieces were uniform in size and shape, as if manufactured, not naturally occurring. But how could refined metal be coming out of his body? And why did each fragment look exactly like the others, perfectly formed and gleaming, despite being buried for months in infected tissue? The bizarre discovery left Clint shaken and bewildered. He scooped some of the fluid into an old jar, studying the metallic fragments with growing unease. On closer inspection, they were tiny pieces of refined silver, each no bigger than a grain of sand, yet perfectly molded into identical shapes. His first instinct was to bind the wound and try to forget what he'd witnessed. But the hole in his leg continued to ooze the mysterious liquid. From every drop that fell, Clint noticed something disturbing. The metallic fragments weren't random debris. They gathered in patterns on the ground, as if drawn by some unseen force. 2. An uninvited witness. Silver speaks louder than words. Unexpected arrival of Jed Miller 3 hours later shattered Clint's hope of keeping the discovery a secret. The grizzled rancher rode up to the main house just as Clint was frantically trying to clean the strange substance off his boots, the oily fluid having steadily dripped during his return from the pasture. "Clint, you look like you wrestled a wildcat," Jed called out, dismounting by the porch, his gaze immediately fixed on the dark stains covering Clint's pant leg and the small puddle forming at his feet. "What in tarnation happened to you?" Instead of an explanation, Clint showed Jed the jar of fluid and its metallic contents. Jed's face paled as he examined the bizarre substance, holding it up to catch the light filtering through the liquid. "That ain't natural," Jed whispered carefully, setting the jar down. "Nothin' that comes out of a man ought to look like that." A tremor of fear, one Clint had never heard before, laced his voice. The two men stood in awkward silence, both trying to comprehend what they had seen. Then, Jed's expression shifted from fear to something approaching recognition as he studied the metallic fragments more closely. "Clint," he said slowly, "these little pieces, they look like refined silver. Real refined silver." There was a dangerous note in his voice that Clint had never heard before. "How long's this been comin' out of ya?" Before Clint could answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed from the eastern trail. Both men turned to see a small wagon kicking up a plume of dust in the distance, moving faster than any supply delivery or casual visit could warrant. Someone was riding with a purpose, and Clint suspected his mysterious condition was about to become far less private. But how could anyone know about something that had only happened hours ago? And why did Jed keep staring at the silver fragments with such intense awe, as if he'd seen something similar before? 3. The arrival of the doctor. A chilling revelation. Silas Thorne descended from the wagon with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent decades traversing rough country roads. His companion, a young woman with intelligent eyes and steady hands, retrieved a leather medical bag from the wagon bed, her gaze fixed intently on the stained porch boards. "Mr. Harding, I presume?" "Doctor." Thorne approached cautiously. "I'm Dr. Thorne, and this is my daughter, Eliza. We received word of your condition." His gaze flickered between Clint's leg and Jed, who had strategically positioned himself between the newcomers and the jar of strange fluid. Clint felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Who told you about this?" "It just happened, Doctor." Thorne exchanged a meaningful glance with his daughter before responding. "Word travels fast in small communities, Mr. Harding, especially when it concerns unusual medical conditions." He gestured towards the wound, but made no attempt to come closer. "May I ask how long you've been producing this substance?" "It ain't just some substance," Jed interrupted, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. "Look at these silver pieces in it, Doctor. Have you ever seen anything like that come out of a man?" Eliza stepped forward, her medical training overriding any caution her father exhibited. She knelt beside the stained boards, careful not to touch the mysterious fluid, and examined the metallic fragments with scientific wonder. "The formation patterns are unlike anything in medical literature," she murmured. "These aren't kidney or gallstones. They're too uniform, too pure, Doctor." Thorne's expression darkened at his daughter's observations. "Eliza, step back. We don't know what kind of infection might be involved." There was a warning in his tone that went beyond normal medical caution, as if he feared something more than illness. But Clint noticed something else disturbing in the doctor's demeanor. The man's hands trembled slightly as he reached into his coat, not for medical instruments, but for a small glass vial he held with particular care. Inside the vial, Clint could see the familiar yellowish substance with the same metallic fragments that we're currently using from his leg. "You've seen this before," Clint said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "You already know what this is, Doctor." Thorne's face went pale, and the silence stretched uncomfortably long before he finally spoke. "There have been other cases, very few, and all strictly confidential." He looked directly at Clint, an expression blending medical curiosity and genuine concern. "Mr. Harding, I need to ask you a very important question, and your answer could determine the severity of your condition." The gravity of his words hung over the small group like a pall. Whatever was happening to Clint's body, it was far more serious and sinister than any of them had initially realized. 4. Whispers of Silverpeak. A deadly secret uncovered. "Did you ever work at the Silverpeak mining district?" "Doctor." Thorne's voice was almost a whisper. "Specifically, the silver mines near Widow's Creek." Clint's blood ran cold. 15 years ago, before settling on his ranch, he'd spent 2 grueling months working those very mines. The pay had been exceptional, but the conditions so brutal most men quit within weeks. Clint had stayed longer than most, driven by a desperate need to earn enough to buy his land. "How in the hell do you even know about that?" Clint stammered. "Those mines closed down years ago after all the accidents, Doctor." Thorne's expression grew grim. "Accidents? They weren't just accidents, Mr. Harding. They were symptoms. Men started developing growths, similar to yours. At first, the mining company suppressed it, claiming they were common occupational injuries, but then the substance started appearing." Eliza, who had been quietly examining the fluid sample, froze at her father's words. "Father, you never told me the Silverpeak cases were still relevant." "I thought those were just theoretical medical studies, because you hoped they weren't connected, Doctor," Thorne replied grimly. "But seeing this," he held up the vial again, matching it to the fresh sample, "the metallic content is identical." Every fragment, every compound. It's the same phenomenon that affected 17 miners before the company abandoned the site. Jed stepped forward, aggression in his stance. Affected? How? You're saying Clint's got some kind of miner's disease? The miners with these growths had one thing in common, Doctor, Thorne said carefully. They were exposed to a particular vein of silver ore containing unusual mineral deposits. Over time, microscopic particles embedded themselves in their tissues, eventually forming these masses. Clint felt the world spin. What happened to those 17 miners? Doctor, Thorne looked towards the distant mountains where the Silverpeak Mines lay hidden. They tried various treatments. Some attempted surgical removal of the growths. Others used caustic substances to burn them out. All 17 died within months of symptom onset. So you're saying I'm gonna die? Clint asked, though he felt stronger now than he had in weeks. Not necessarily, Doctor, Thorne replied, studying Clint intently with renewed interest. You're the first case where the growth ruptured naturally rather than being forcibly opened. That could change the outcome entirely. Before anyone could respond, a new sound reached them from the direction of the mountains. A distant rumble of heavy machinery and the sharp crack of explosive charges. Someone was working the mines again, and the coincidence felt anything but accidental. The sounds from the mountains grew louder throughout the morning. By noon, a plume of dust was visible in the distance, rising from the area of the old Silverpeak Mines. Someone had not only reopened the supposedly abandoned sites, but was conducting large-scale operations there. That's impossible, Doctor, Thorne muttered, staring at the distant activity. The mining company swore the sites would remain closed forever after the health issues. 5. The truth unearths itself. Greed's deadly harvest. As the day wore on, Jed grew increasingly agitated, finally unable to hold his tongue. Doc, there's something you gotta know about these silver fragments. I've seen them before, and they didn't come out of no sick miner. All eyes turned to Jed as he continued. 5 years back, I was in Harmony Creek when a stranger came through, selling what he called the purest silver ever found. He had a whole pouch of these exact same fragments, and he was getting top dollar for 'em from jewelers and silversmiths. Clint felt a sickening understanding form in his gut. You think someone's mining it from people? I do, Jed said grimly. Those 17 miners didn't die from no sickness. I reckon they were murdered for what was growing inside 'em. Dr. Thorne's face went ashen. That's a grave accusation, Mr. Miller. The mining company has detailed medical records for every case. Medical records can be forged, Eliza said quietly, her scientific mind already racing with the implications. If these metallic deposits were as pure and valuable as they seemed, the financial incentive for exploitation would be enormous. The sound of approaching riders interrupted their conversation. This time, however, the visitors weren't medical personnel. 6 grim-faced men in mining company uniforms rode up to the ranch. Their weapons were plainly visible, and their intentions were clearly hostile. The lead rider, a burly man with a cold stare, dismounted with significant authority. Dr. Thorne, you were supposed to signal us after confirming the condition. We've been waiting for your report. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Clint. The situation is more complex than anticipated. This man requires further medical observation, not immediate intervention. Our instructions are clear, the mining foreman replied coldly. Any individual showing signs of mineral deposits is to be transferred to company medical facilities for treatment? Treatment? Jed scoffed bitterly. You mean harvestin', don't ya? How many more folks have you killed for the silver in their bodies? The accusation hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. The mining company men exchanged glances, and Clint knew Jed had come dangerously close to the truth. The standoff stretched, tense and dangerous, as the mining company men slowly fanned out around the small group. Their weapons remained holstered, but their intentions were clear. Clint was going with them, willingly or otherwise. Mr. Harding, the foreman said, with practiced reasonableness, you have a serious medical condition requiring specialized treatment. Our corporate facilities have the expertise to help you. The same expertise that helped 17 other miners. Clint retorted, finding a courage he didn't know he possessed. Funny how all that help ended with them dying. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, his medical authority lending weight to his words. The patient is stable and responding well to natural healing processes. Forcible intervention at this stage could prove fatal. Dr. Thorne, the foreman's voice was laced with warning. You are bound by contract to our company. Your medical opinion is subject to company oversight. Eliza moved to her father's side. My medical opinion is beholden to no one, and I'm telling you, moving this patient now would constitute assault. The foreman's patience was clearly snapping. Miss Thorne, you are interfering with lawful operations. The mineral deposits within this man's body are company property extracted from company mines. This admission sent a shockwave through the group. Jed drew his pistol, though his hand trembled more with rage than fear. Company property? You're talking about pieces of a man's body like they're ore samples? Technically, the foreman continued, in a chillingly calm tone, any materials extracted on company mining properties remain company assets, regardless of where they come to rest. Mr. Harding signed standard mining contracts 15 years ago which included mineral rights clauses. Clint felt nauseous. You're saying the silver growing inside me belongs to you? We're saying you were exposed to company materials while working on company property. Standard liability and asset recovery protocols apply. Dr. Thorne decisively pulled out his medical bag. Then let me surgically remove the deposits right here. If it's company property, you can have them immediately. No, the foreman roared, giving away more than he intended. Surgical extraction would damage the purity. The deposits must be harvested using specialized techniques to preserve their value. The truth, finally, was laid bare. The mining company had deliberately exposed workers to silver-bearing ore, knowing they would eventually grow valuable deposits within their bodies. The 17 dead miners were likely subjected to harvesting, their deaths covered up as occupational accidents. But Clint's case was different. His growth had ruptured naturally, which could damage the precious silver and reduce its market value. That's why they needed him alive and compliant to perfect their extraction methods. 6. Justice in the Badlands. A new dawn's revelation of the mining company's true intentions spurred the small group into action. Dr. Thorne quickly began preparing a medical solution to flush residual silver deposits from Clint's system, while Eliza gathered evidence to document the company's criminal activity. You won't prove a thing. The foreman sneered, but his confidence was clearly shaken. Even if you could, who'd believe a wild tale like that? Jed grimly smiled and pulled out a small notepad he'd been writing in throughout the conversation. Funny thing about keeping records, every word you said today is written down, along with the names and descriptions of all the men who rode with ya. The mining company men realized the situation had become untenable. They'd all but admitted to criminal exploitation of workers, conspiracy to murder, and theft of human tissue for commercial gain. Even their corporate connections couldn't protect them from charges this severe. Dr. Thorne finished his preparation and turned to Clint. This will be painful, but it should flush out most of the remaining deposits before they cause further complications. The natural rupture likely saved your life by relieving internal pressure. As the treatment began, the wound on Clint's leg continued to ooze, releasing the last of the contaminated fluids. The silver fragments that emerged were noticeably smaller and less pure than previous samples, confirming Dr. Thorne's theory that surgical intervention would have been dangerous and ultimately counterproductive. The foreman made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Even if you expose our operations, the legal processes will take years. Mr. Harding will require ongoing medical attention that only our facilities can provide. Actually, Eliza said with satisfaction, I've been documenting everything for the Territorial Medical Board. By this time tomorrow, every doctor in 3 territories will know about Silverpeak Syndrome and how to safely treat it. Faced with imminent exposure and prosecution, the mining company men reluctantly remounted their horses and rode off. But their threat was far from empty. Corporate power and political influence could still make life difficult for anyone who opposed them. However, in the weeks that followed, justice moved faster than expected. Jed's meticulous records, combined with Dr. Thorne's medical evidence and Eliza's documentation, provided territorial authorities with everything they needed to launch a full investigation. The mining company's political connections crumbled. In the face of evidence of systematic murder for profit, Clint's recovery was complete within a few months, leaving only a small scar where the growth had been. More importantly, his testimony helped authorities locate and rescue 3 other men who had been abducted for harvesting, saving their lives and exposing the full scope of the company's crimes. The Silverpeak Mines were permanently shut down, and the mining company executives faced charges of murder, conspiracy, and worker exploitation. The silver deposits that had caused so much suffering were declared a public health hazard, and possession of harvested materials became a federal crime. Clint returned to his ranch with a newfound appreciation for the simple honesty of a rancher's life. The ordeal had exposed the depths of human greed and cruelty, but also the strength of ordinary people coming together against injustice. When the truth finally came out, the lump that threatened to destroy his life became the key to unraveling a conspiracy that had claimed 17 lives and threatened to claim many more, had it not been for one man's courage to seek the truth, however painful it might be. If you were Clint, what would you do in this terrifying situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you were captivated by this tale, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next gripping narrative.